right there. Yeah,
I got you, buddy.
that's what I wanted to talk. So, a quick introduction for those of you who don't know who we are. I am Darren Alf, the Bicycle Touring Pro. I have been riding my bike around the world since 2001, and I am the guy behind the website at bicycletouringpro.com, where I teach like you how to conduct their own bicycle tours all around the world, right?
Correct.
And and so I've been running the website at Bicycle Touring Pro since 2007. I have biked across, I don't know, 75 countries or so. Rob has biked at least a half dozen of those with me.
True.
And and so today, well, also we got to talk. I got to introduce you. Maybe you can talk about what you do when you're not biking.
Okay.
Yeah.
By trade, I'm a high school science teacher. Specifically, I teach grade 11 and grade 12 physics. And the nice thing about that particular job is it does afford me a large block of time in the summer to go on these bike tours. And in fact, that's how I met Darren back in 2012 when I did the Bike Switzerland bike tour. And that was my very first bike tour ever, and it was one that was overseas, and it was a big challenge, and I almost didn't go. I had a lot of encouragement from friends who said, just try it, because I had to go alone, and that's very intimidating. My job affords these opportunities, so I'm very fortunate with that. And also, aside from teaching, I'm also a musician, and I have a small recording studio. My band is called Red Arms. We just released a record, and we just got off a short little stint in Ottawa and Montreal. So very busy doing rock and roll stuff, teaching stuff, and also whenever I can, cycle touring stuff.
Yeah. So those of you who've been following me on Instagram may have seen Rob and his band. I posted some video from his band. So check them out. Red Arms.
That's right.
From London, Ontario, Canada.
Correct.
So you mentioned we met in Switzerland on a guided bike tour that we did there back in 2012. And I think we should talk about like one of the things that I really like about bicycle touring is one, anybody basically can do it. Like you don't have to be a crazy cyclist.
And that is true. Now, so I didn't know what to expect the first time I went, and of course I did probably one of the more aggressive tours. I did the really heavy duty one, but there is a large variety of styles of bike tours that you can do for all fitness levels. The key thing is not to overcommit to the amount of distance that you do, and take your time, but also don't overpack.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second, though.
Yeah.
Because I was going to say the other thing that I really enjoy about bicycle touring is one, like regular people can do it. Like
Yep.
you don't have to be a crazy marathon person or something like that, or a
Yep.
racer. But two, also like everybody has their own motivations
Yes.
for going on the trip. And I think like there's, I don't know, 70 people on the live stream right now. If we asked each and every one of you what your motivation is for wanting to go on a bike tour, I bet we would get about like 50 different answers. Because I hear all kinds of things. Like people want to get into nature, people want to meet new people, they want to use their bike trips to learn about a new place or like go back to where their family is from, that sort of a thing.
Yep.
What was the thing that motivated you to want to go bicycle touring when you first started?
Well, when I first started, basically what I got into cycling in the first place is because I was significantly overweight. And I had some health issues in my 20s as a result of it. And then I decided when my doctor told me that I have to be on certain medication for the rest of my life because of my weight and whatnot, I said there's got to be a better way. So I really started focusing on cycling, and I really started getting into it. And the next evolution was to go on these bigger trips. And I always had a bit of social anxiety about traveling on my own. And but the cycling was the big bridge for me. What the real push was, what finally brought me to that point, is I had a particularly difficult few years just before the 2012 trip that I did with Darren, that really sort of affected me in a fairly profound way, and it was a difficult time. And then I decided that this was the time when I got through that particular challenging moment, that this was the thing that I was going to do. And originally I was supposed to do it with a good friend of mine, and we're going to do this together. We were both going through difficulties at the time, and we said, when all this is said and done and all got sorted, we're going to go on this big bike ride, this big bike tour. And at the last minute, he had to bail out, and then I was left by myself. And then, thanks to the encouragement of some good friends who said, just go anyway, and I went. But it was those factors that really got me to try this big challenge, because the idea of cycling through Switzerland was very appealing to me, because I love the idea of climbing mountains and
In like one of the most
beautiful
beautiful
countries
places in the world.
in the world.
Yeah, yeah.
And of course in Canada we have British Columbia, which the Rockies are absolutely beautiful. But what was something different about Switzerland was all the cities and all the towns. It's much more densely populated, and I was really interested in seeing all these places. So that really appealed to me, but it was scary, the idea of climbing these big mountains. And London, Ontario is relatively flat, so training for it, and of course I was worried about that sort of thing, took some foresight, but it turned out to be the best experience of my life.
Yeah.
To that day.
Look at here, like this guy on the live chat says, Droner in his bike says, you inspired me to ride after my bad car accident.
There you go,
You know,
right?
like everybody has some different little thing. So like yours was maybe weight loss a little bit,
Yep.
recovering from whatever was happening in your life.
Yep.
And I think also you wanted to go on this bike trip, but you didn't want to go by yourself.
Correct. And it was just that, I may be in a band, but I am at my core introverted. And it always gave me, for most of my life, I found it hard to meet new people on my own. In a crowd, I was fine. So the idea of going to a foreign country where I was not fluent in the local language, meeting people I've never met before, that in my 20s, that would have been the most terrifying idea, right? That's when most people do these sort of things. In my 20s, there was not a snowball's chance in Hades I was able to do something like that on myself. But, years and years of, sort of building myself up to it. And once I got into my 30s, I was just like, well, it's either now or never. And,
Yeah.
and now it's like, now it's old hat,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that is like one of the advantages of a guided group tour like we met on.
Yeah.
And like I've continually showed in 20 different countries all around the world, is that there are these guided group tours that you can join. And so you don't have to go on a bike tour all by yourself. You have a group of people that have similar interests, and who knows, you might meet somebody like we met each other on that bike tour that you would then end up doing future bike trips with.
Yeah, and it was really funny, because that was one of the selling points that one of my close friends said to me. It's just like, you might meet someone really awesome and like another rad cyclist that you might end up doing future tours with. And I said, yeah, maybe that'll happen. And that literally is exactly what happened. Yeah. So, and I would recommend personally, if you have trepidation, especially about doing something, going by yourself, is on the guided bike tour, it is actually really an ideal environment to do so, especially one where you have the sag wagon and you have someone transporting your luggage from hotel to hotel. This first bike tour we did with Bike Switzerland was really great, especially for that, because you only had to worry about cycling and you didn't have to go super fast, and there was always someone there to make sure everything was okay, especially if you had technical difficulties, you wouldn't get lost. And it was a really, really, really great introduction. And as we progressed through this, Darren and I have gone on more of the fully self-supported, and I've become more comfortable with that over the years doing that with Darren.
Fucking idiots. Bye bye. Anyways, stupid people. So yeah, it's just interesting that the motivations behind everybody is totally different.
All right. Michael here.
Oh yeah.
From Skellefteå. Hey, look, I can still remember how to pronounce it.
Yeah. Yeah, Michael, we went on a bike trip. Well, we stopped at his house on the bike trip.
Yeah.
And Michael joined me on my Central Europe bike trip as well. That's cool. Anyways, yeah, so it's kind of cool. Everybody has different motivations for going on a bike trip. We're coming from different skill levels, and that's one of the things I like most about bicycle touring. So let's talk about silly, stupid things that.
Well, before I have to
Oh
address
yeah,
this, so why is Darren in Canada? Well, he's here to visit me because I live in London, Ontario, Canada.
yeah,
And Darren happened to be up in the East Coast doing some cycle touring, and I've been trying to get Darren to hang out here in London and to discover, our city. And he's been here for 2 weeks and just chilling out, hanging out at the house, and doing a lot of work while I've been working on renovations and doing stuff with the band. So, you know, London's a pretty fun place, and Canada's a great place to visit, isn't it, Darren?
yeah. It's okay.
Hey,
No, I drove to the East Coast for this Bike Virginia event that happened back in July or something like
yes, yeah,
that.
yeah.
And then I've just been kind of staying on the East Coast for the whole time. So, and now I'm here in Canada. And I'm flying also, by the way, I'm going to Portugal in like 10 days. And I'll be doing a bike trip there. Many of you, my readers, Bicycle Touring Pro readers, will be on that bike tour with me in Portugal. So I'm looking forward to seeing those of you who have joined the tour. And there are also some other trips coming up. You can comment on it
Yeah,
if you
so,
want to.
yeah.
There are some other trips coming up that you can join me on. I'm going to be doing a bike tour in New Zealand in January. If you've ever wanted to go cycling in New Zealand, yeah, your opportunity is coming up. So check out my website at bicycletouringpro.com/calendar, and you can see all of the bicycle tours that I have planned for the future. Now my phone is flashing low battery. I'm at 10%.
Okay,
That's not good.
that does not make any sense.
It's not. It's probably discharging more than we're putting into it.
Weird.
Um,
Okay.
ADSR. Yeah, Rob's band is called Red Arms. Red Arms, like a red arm.
Yeah.
Um,
It's the band originally was called Red Army, but then when because we were like inspired by 80s style the 80s style punk rock scene that was all very Cold War influenced, and that was the main thing. But we realized that if you call a band Red Army and you try to search that online, all you get is Soviet stuff. So Red Arms was more Google friendly. That's the reason why.
yeah, yeah. Anyways, so let's talk about silly, stupid things that people bring on their bike trips. What's the stupidest thing you ever brought?
The stupidest thing I ever brought, to be honest with you, was a laptop. And I realized I was, for what I needed to do, bringing a laptop is probably a little too much weight, especially when you are in the forest most of the time. If you're going from, Airbnb to Airbnb, sure, that makes sense. But a laptop is a lot of weight that you're almost never, ever using. Now, Darren, of course, it's a different situation because I mean you're using that for work because as you go from spot to spot, you need that for the other thing. But as a cycle tourist, you don't need to have your laptop.
Most people nowadays are just carrying a phone, and that's
Yeah,
all you need. I mean, the technology is getting smaller and smaller, and there's so much like you're editing videos and stuff now on your phone that we couldn't do a few years ago. So
yeah.
it's pretty cool. Stupidest thing I've ever brought on my bike tour was a small little ice chest. On my first bike tour, I was thinking like, oh, if I buy some cheese or something, I need to refrigerate it, you know? And so like I carried this little igloo ice chest, which I never used on the entire bike tour in 30 days. I carried it with me, and it's the stupidest thing I've ever packed, for sure.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But I mean, like, and that makes sense. Like, if you've never gone on a trip
Yeah, you
before,
just don't know.
yeah, yeah,
I'm just trying to think of the other silly things. Like, fortunately, when I went my first couple of tours, Darren gave me a lot of advice. So a lot of the dumb things that I would have brought, I didn't. Um, Less obvious dumb things. You don't need as many clothes as you think,
yeah.
right? And
What?
that's the hard thing is curating the perfect combination of various things.
Yeah.
Regardless, you're gonna get smelly, right? That's the nature of it. But if you're doing the Airbnb thing or hotel thing, buy quick dry stuff and wash it. It's like 2 pair of underwear is all you need. One pair is what you're wearing. The other one you wash, let it dry overnight, and then let it dry in your pack, and then you alternate between the two, right? Synthetic clothing synthetic materials that are quick dry, I think are key. I wouldn't bring cotton generally, but of course, the one thing that I do appreciate at the end of the tour is I have one change of clothes that is clean that I haven't worn, because after being out in the bush for a week or so, it's really nice to actually change into something not smelling.
Yeah. Well, I was just consulting with a guy just the other day who was preparing for a cross-country bicycle tour, and he was kind of showing me on a live stream everything that he had packed. And he had 4 sets of kits, 4 sets of pants and jerseys, and 3 sets of gloves, like light gloves with no fingers, light, medium gloves with fingers, and then heavy gloves. And this is a summertime bike tour. And I told him, like, 90% of my bike tours I've never even brought gloves.
Yeah.
And the few trips that I have brought gloves, like 2 years ago when I rode up to the Nordkapp in Norway, which is you're riding up above the Arctic Circle. Even then, like, I was barely just wearing light gloves, and there's snow on the ground, and you know what I mean? So it's like, there's certain things you think in your mind you might need, like 3 sets of gloves and 4 sets of jerseys. But in reality, you can get by with so much less.
Yeah.
When I went to Africa, I spent 3 months in Africa, and I had one jersey that I was cycling in.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
One jersey.
And that's the thing. One jersey's fine. And what I think makes a lot of sense is when you do bring things that you can layer, right? That you can interchange. Because like if you have like a lot of thinner layers, then it gives you the option for various temperatures, right? So bringing like a winter jacket and then a spring jacket and then a summer thing, that doesn't actually make a lot of sense. What you want, and this actually comes from my cycle community, because I bike almost all year long except for in the ice and snow.
Yeah.
So I tend to have a number of thinner layers, all quick dry. And that way I can, when the conditions change, because spring in Canada is just stupid. In the morning it'll be -5, and by Celsius,
Yeah.
-5 Celsius, and by the afternoon it can be like 17 degrees Celsius. So you have to have a huge range, and of course rain, whatnot. So fewer, thinner layers, blocking the wind, that sort of thing. Now I disagree a little bit with Darren about the glove things, but that's just because my hands get super cold all the time. But if I was to bring a pair of gloves, make sure they're gloves that dry relatively quickly, and will protect you from the wind, right? If they don't work well when they're wet, then they're absolutely useless,
Yeah.
right? There's no point in having gloves if they're not gloves that keep you warm when they're wet.
Yeah. Well, also about gloves, like a lot of people think gloves are for comfort.
Yes, yeah.
Like the padding in them, but actually that's the last thing that like gloves are actually for.
Yeah.
Usually, the first thing is if you crash.
Yes.
That's the main reason like road riders wear gloves, is so
Yeah.
that when they crash, they don't tear their hands apart.
Yeah, I was stupid. I forgot to wear my road gloves first time in a long time, and of course I wiped out. And you can't see it now, but this took about, well, you can see the remains of an earlier accident this summer, and I tore my hand apart really good. And just because I forgot to wear my gloves. So that was stupid, but that's road.
That was road riding. That wasn't touring.
That wasn't
people.
touring, and I was
Yeah.
going at, a
Road
stupid speed
Yeah.
on wet conditions. So that's a bit of a different situation.
I've been biking now. Next year will be my 20th year of long distance bicycle touring, and I have never crashed my bicycle in any way
Yeah.
on my travels.
Yeah.
And so that's how touring is very different, is because you're at a slower pace. And especially like when I'm traveling in a foreign country or even anywhere far from home, I go out of my way to be careful and to not hurt myself.
Darren, I actually want to talk about this one comment from Sneakers Corner. I bring a big pump because I found small pumps useless when I have a flat. And I absolutely agree. And actually, I want to show you something. Right? I'm just going to step out for a second. I'm just going to grab this because I agree. I have those stupid small pumps, and they suck, right? But I also found something that is a good in-between. 1 second.
Okay.
You keep
I'll
folks
keep
entertained
talking.
at home.
Yeah. Anyways, someone was asking about shoes too, and whether you should bring 2 pairs of shoes. That is debatable, and it depends on the bike tour that you're doing, what the weather is going to be like, etc. Most people who go off on a bicycle tour do not bring two pairs of shoes, but I have certainly brought two pairs of shoes on a lot of my bike trips. So it just depends what you're doing. If you're going around the world, for example, bringing two pairs of shoes is probably a good idea. But if you're just going off on a trip that's like a week long or something, you can probably just get by with the single riding on the bike. Um, Anyways, yeah, so I'm reading some of your questions here. Hello from Canada. Quite a few people from Canada on here. I'm not sure. What about stealth camping in Canada? They want to know, is that possible? Or just wild camping, I think is what you're asking.
It's hard because where I live in Southern Ontario, the population is fairly dense, so there isn't too much in the way of free land to do that. When you start getting in like Northern Ontario or on the East Coast, where there's a lot of crown land, it's not going to be a problem. Around where I live, not so much. So we have to probably deal with this charger situation.
Well, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, so I can get an extension cord here. Sorry, we're still dealing with this technical problem because Darren's phone is actually
We're at 7% on the phone.
and I don't know why it's not charging with this thing because
Yeah.
this thing usually does. But any case, but just get back to the whole issue. All right, so really the
Sure.
choices. Yeah, so here are the issues. All right, so this is my most compact pump, right? Now, this is what I often carry on my road bike if I'm doing like just if I want to go super lightweight. But pumping with this up to 120 psi is kind of a drag. You can do it, but it's not really great. Now, this is obviously much easier to pump your tires with, but this is an absurd thing to bring with you, right? It's heavy, it's bulky. Sure, you pump up the tires real quick, but the same company, Pfizer, has made this. Now, this is the perfect compromise. It's the largest of these compacts that I've ever seen, and it actually pumps the tire extremely quickly with ease. And the issue I always have is this part of these things. They are usually too small, not enough surface area, and they hurt like hell after a while when you're trying to pump the tires. This one's big enough, and the stand is decent, and it only takes a fraction of the time. This will take maybe 15 minutes to pump up my tire. I can do it in like under 5 minutes with this thing.
Yeah, so that's like a mini floor pump.
This is a mini floor pump.
Yeah.
Now, I now this is the only pump that I use. I don't even bring this most of the time because it's just so damn small. All right, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna ghost for a second and see if I can get you
Okay.
some proper power. One second.
And I have also talked about pumps quite a bit on my website at bicycletouringpro.com. So if you just go there and type in pump, you will see some of the pumps that I have recommended over the years. And there's a whole bunch of different pumps that I have used and tested. I don't have my pump with me in my hand at the moment. Otherwise, I would show it to you. My pump is actually more similar to this one, but there is a hose that comes out of it like this one, which makes it fairly powerful. And so I like smaller pumps because frankly, I just don't use them very much. But I do want a pump that is powerful and that actually works. And there are a lot of small pumps like this one that really, really suck. So paying extra money for a good pump is definitely one of those things. There's a lot of things in the cycling world that it doesn't really make much difference if you buy the cheapest thing out there or the really expensive one. But a pump is one of those things where I feel like it's worth spending a couple extra bucks on. So yeah. The other thing we wanted to talk about was training and how to get ready for a bike tour. I have been in communication with my other friend Rob, who is currently cycling across America from the West Coast to the East Coast. My other friend Rob, this year he climbed Mount Everest, he swam the English Channel, and now he also got married, and now he is biking across America. He's calling it the World Tri, as in a triathlon. And so he's climbing a mountain, swim the English Channel, and bike across America. And he's on day 4 of his bike tour right now, and I've been trying to help him prepare for. But he called me last night, on the end of day 3 of his bike tour, and he's really tired. He's trying to go across the country in about a month's time, which means you got to cycle about 130 miles a day in order to do that, which is twice what I usually recommend people do it in,
Yeah.
more than twice. So he's really, really pushing himself. But he wanted to do it this way. So I've been trying to give him some tips on how to do that. And part of the tips that I usually give people has to do with their training before the bike tour even begins,
Right.
because that's incredibly important. Too many people wait, don't do any training at all, start their bike tour, and they're dead by the end of day one. They wake up on the morning of day two feeling exhausted. They try to ride a little bit or something. They finish day two and they're completely dead, and they want to go home and quit and cry to their mom. That happens so many times. And I think that could be prevented if people just did a little bit of training.
Correct. Yeah, I would agree with that, Darren.
And so, what's really interesting with Rob here is Rob is a teacher and he lives 10 kilometers or 10 miles?
10 miles, 14 kilometers
Yeah.
from work.
Okay. Something like that. Yeah. From his work. And pretty much every single day, Rob rides his bicycle to work, to and from work. So he's getting a 10-mile bike ride to work and a 10-mile bike ride back. So 20 miles, 30 kilometers about every single day,
Yeah.
which is incredible training if you're going to be doing a bicycle tour in the future.
And it's actually, in my opinion, it's the best way to actually prep it, because the thing is about a bicycle tour, it's not necessarily about speed, it's about endurance. And you need saddle time. And the reason why you need saddle time is it's your butt. When you're sitting on the bike for that amount of time, no matter how comfortable your saddle is, you do need time in it for your body to adjust. I mean, you do have to you have to build up your core strength for it to be long-term comfortable. So one of the things, since I'm a teacher, I have to haul a lot of stuff. I have my computer with me. I have my marking, right? So try turning the charger.
It's not, it's fine.
Okay.
It's just, we're outputting.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
We're at 5% on
We're
my
at
battery.
5%. So
If we disconnect soon, you'll know why.
you'll know why. Sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm carrying substantial weight, obviously, like the stuff that I have to mark, all my clothes, etc. So it's like going on a mini tour on the daily, right?
Yeah. But also that distance that Rob is cycling, 20 miles or about 30 kilometers, like that, I believe is like the perfect training distance, because anything less than that is not really going to give you I don't know, like what you need to feel what it feels like to be on a bicycle tour. Because the average bicycle tourist usually travels between like 40 and 60 miles, which is what? 60 and 100 kilometers,
Yeah.
something like that, 60 and 100 kilometers per day. So what you're doing on a daily basis is not quite at that level,
Yeah.
but it's enough so that when you do bump it up to a full day of riding, you aren't going to feel like dead.
Yeah, and the other thing that I did, because I don't live in a mountainous area. Like London is Ontario. London, Ontario is relatively flat. Now there's some hills, but I mean nothing compared to like mountains. So one of the things that I did to actually train my leg strength is now it's your bike tech would just be shaking their head a little bit, but I would ride the hills up on a higher gear, so I'd have to work a little bit harder to try to simulate what it would be like to do a climb. So just even stuff like that, just put the bike in a heavier gear and try pushing at that heavier gear to sort of get your legs used to that sort of thing, because you're going to hit hills on a bike tour. Like
Yeah, there's no avoiding it usually.
yeah, I mean, even the flattest areas are going to have some type of incline, and if you're hauling weight and you've never tried going up a hill, then you're going to really psychologically suffer.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is like the more often you do it, it's a psych game. What your body can do more than your brain believes, and if you actually just do it and not think about how high you have to go, just think of one pedal stroke at a time, and then take a break, like relax. You know what I mean? I'm guilty of this too, is I do like to push myself but I've also been I've personally competitive cyclist now for the better part of 25 years. So this is something that I've sort of built myself up to, right? But in the beginning, I pushed, and then you know, never overdid it to the point where I said, to heck with this, I'm done. Because there's that fine line, and also it's you still have to like it. You still have to enjoy it. I mean, you're not going to enjoy every single minute. There are going to be times where it's just kind of shit, right? Yeah, that's going to happen. Sometimes it's going to be a drag, but most times it's really awesome. And if you train ahead of time and you do that consistently and you just do it in your daily routines, like cycle to the grocery store, right? Cycle to the grocery store with your panniers. Do some of your grocery shopping. Cycle back, right? Any reason to ride your bike with weight in and around town is a great way to do it. And just try to combine it with your daily activity in a natural, organic way, right?
Yeah. Well, one of the things too that we were talking about is Rob has this trail system near his home where you can ride your bike and not have to interact with the cars. And this is a good thing, but for people that are in a similar situation that have a trail like that, what I oftentimes hear from people is that they will train for their bike tours only by riding on these bike trails. And as soon as they get on their real bike tour, that bike trail disappears and they have to actually navigate on real roads and streets and highways and that kind of thing. And it's scary to do that, to switch from a bike only lane to now you're dealing with cars and people and who knows what else, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I that's one of the things I talk about in my book, The Bicycle Touring Blueprint, is the fact that you should be training in all sorts of environments. You need to be comfortable when you leave on a bicycle tour, not just riding on a bicycle path, but riding in roads or on highways in all sorts of conditions.
Yeah.
You don't want to be figuring that out on the first day of a bike tour.
Yeah.
That's just a recipe for disaster.
When we were in Finland, we were on a section of the roadway, and we did our best to sort of plan a route. But when you're not familiar with the area, it's hard to know. We ended up taking for a section, and I think it was about 10 kilometers. One of the E-level highways, the E30 something or something like that. The equivalent of the freeway system in North America. And this section of road was incredibly, in my opinion, unpleasant. It was nonstop traffic. It was trucks, and it was only for a short period of time until we got off on the other roads. But that can be very off-putting if you've never done that before. If you've never been on a roadway with that much traffic, because sometimes it's going to happen. There are road closures, or the route that you picked is maybe unrideable for the style of tire that you have on your bike, and you may have to take a slightly busier road. If you're not comfortable doing that, and you get into a situation where you have no choice, like what are you going to do? You're either you have to go forward, because turning back might not be just possible, right? So I mean. These are things to consider. Of course, researching your route as best as you can is important too, right? But sometimes things happen. And when we did Norway, we ran into that situation where the route we were taking, the road was closed because of landslides. What were you going to do about that? So we had to take this route called the Rallerwagen, which is the most amazing road route in all of Norway. And I was pretty excited because I've ridden it before. The problem is I had inappropriate tires for that. And because I just said, hey, we're just doing road. So I decided to take my super fast, low rolling resistance type tires. That did not pay off because I ended up getting 4 flats in 10 minutes?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, so that's the other thing. And choosing the appropriate kit is also something to consider.
For the type of tour that you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get an email every single day, I swear, every single day from somebody saying, what kind of touring bike should I buy? And based off of that question alone, I can tell them nothing.
Yes.
Because the type of bike you ride and the gear you use depends on the type of bicycle tour that you're going to be doing, where you're going to be going in the world, what the roads are going to be like, how much gear you're planning to carry, how long you're going to be on the road. All of those things matter
Yeah.
to determining the bike and kit that you use. So if you've been following my adventures, you'll see that I sometimes switch between different bicycles, or I switch the gear that I'm using. You know, I'm using a different sleeping bag, or I don't know, I bring a solar panel one time and I don't have it the next time or something. Why is that? It's because the bike trip that I'm doing is different,
Yeah.
you know?
And now, like, I mean, I guess for if it's entry level, like, because I mean, to those folks' defense, they don't really know what they like yet, right? So it's hard for them to know.
Yeah.
So
That's the thing. Everybody wants to do everything.
yes,
But the truth is, most people don't do everything. They
Yeah.
do one or the. Most people like do road riding, but they think that they're going to do a whole bunch of off road, and
Yeah.
so they get like a bike with really fat tires that can go off road, and then they never go off road.
yeah.
And then
So
that hurts them because it's harder to ride
harder
your
to
bike.
ride. So I have on my commuter bike, which is what I use as my touring bike. I have the Marathon Plus, right, by Schwalbe.
Yeah.
Now those are a relatively bulletproof tire, and the nice thing about those is that they are relatively good for rolling resistance. I mean, it's not the best tire, obviously, but you can handle a little bit of single track with those, and you can handle gravel with weight. So a tire like that is actually you can. It's surprising what sort of road conditions you can actually travel on with a tire that doesn't seem appropriate. Like you can actually take a road bike on gravel roads, right? Even with those slicks. I mean, it's
Yeah.
actually not that bad,
Yeah.
right?
My first touring bike had really narrow tires because it was a road-based touring bicycle, but I did plenty of off-road riding stuff. So
Yeah.
that's what he's talking about.
Yeah, because I mean, you're not going to be doing like single track, like jumping off rocks and stuff like that. I mean, this isn't extreme mountain biking we're talking about here. If you're doing that kind of thing, right, where you're definitely going to be like in rocky conditions, that there's going to be steep inclines, then yeah, in that case, a bike packing bike like your what's it called?
Chumba or
Yeah, yeah.
29 plus.
Something like that is far more appropriate, right?
Yeah.
But if you're going to be doing a combine of road and a little bit of dirt road and gravel, honestly, just like a good touring tire that isn't necessarily great for rolling resistance, but is really good for puncture resistance, because snake bite flats are the enemy, and that's what killed me in Norway. Were the snake bite flats, because the tire that I had just couldn't handle the amount of impact, even as gingerly as I went, right? And that's why I upgraded to these.
Yeah.
Also, the other thing too is make sure you get a good gear ratio. Yeah, that's the other thing too. Make
Yeah,
sure your bike
that's
has
Low gears.
low gears. You do not want to. It's better to have good low gears and lack a good high speed gear than the other way around. Because climbing up a mountain without that extra is a bummer. And I learned that lesson on the same trip when Darren had a cadence like this, and my gears were like this.
Yeah.
And that was extremely, extremely hard because, I'd used that bike for years with weight, but weight when it was flat, or mountains when I had no weight. But then when you combined weight and the mountain, that sucked.
What talking about things that suck? What is like the biggest mistake that you've made on your travels that you can think of? Is there or like something bad maybe that's happened? People are always asking me, what's the worst thing that's ever happened to you on the road or something like that.
Well,
Yeah, that Rollerwagen thing was pretty terrible.
yeah,
right?
that was probably one of the worst things.
Was getting 4 flat tires in
Yeah.
one day.
That's right. That was awful, because then I was almost out. I was just like, okay, we're about to be stranded here. Fortunately, I got that last flat when I was only a kilometer away from Finse, which was the train stop. So I was extremely, extremely lucky. Finland was another experience, and the biggest mistake was the inappropriate tire. So I had another inappropriate tire issue, but for a different reason. I'm kind of obsessed with efficiency because, I don't know, maybe because I'm a science guy or whatever. So I'm always trying to find the fastest rolling tire. But the mistake I made with this particular, and I wish I could remember the brand. I think they were Vittoria's. They were so tight on the rim. that it took so much force to get the tire on and off. So we had another situation where we were doing a little bit of off-road, and again, I picked tires that were not meant for touring. They were like just road tire, like for a road bike, and I got a flat. So we pulled off to the side of the road, and again, Darren and I were, I'm trying to get this tire off, and I forgot how incredibly tight the rubber was, and I almost broke
The whole tire off.
the whole,
Yeah.
just wrenching it off. I finally got the tire off, and it took forever to get the rubber back on. And then, of course, I go to pump it up, I ripped that. And then it happened a second time with my second one. So then I'm down to my last spare. And I remember, Darren, you looked at me,
Yeah.
and you could tell that I was starting to panic a little bit because I was just like, we're screwed, right? And then Darren looked at me and he said, I remember he looked at me and said, Rob,
Calm down.
calm down.
Yeah.
Just go slow, right? Calm down. And that was some very sage advice because I was starting to panic because I was like, I thought we were going to be effed, right? And then Darren said, just take your time and do it slowly. And then eventually I decided not to use the tire irons to put it on, and I just used brute force with my shoe and my hands, but no sharp instrument. And then eventually got it on, right? But I vowed that I will never, ever, ever tour or ride a bike where the tire can't be put on by hand. And that if it's too hard to get on and too hard to get off, right? I strongly recommend against it and get a different tire that has a more appropriate fit because that is a nightmare.
Yeah. That reminds me of a story. I spent 6 months traveling in Peru, and while I was there, I bought a tricycle taxi cab, like one of these three-wheeled. Do you know this story?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
I bought a tricycle taxi cab for $90. It was used, obviously. And it had one gear, and I was going to ride this tricycle from Puno, Peru, up to like Machu Picchu, Cusco, Peru. I think it's a distance of 350 miles, something like that. And so I bought this thing, and it was a piece of junk. It had one gear, and I made it about 3 days on this bicycle, going very, very slowly before I got a flat tire. I woke up in the morning, I had a flat tire. And this bicycle didn't have normal bicycle tires on it. It had big old motorcycle tires, And I did not have, I just had like a plastic tire lever to get, your regular bicycle wheel off. But
Yeah.
I didn't have anything that I could use to get a motorcycle tire
Oh,
off to
God,
repair the
man.
flat. And I'm out in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of Peru, with just like, people living in clay huts and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
It's giving me anxiety just thinking about it.
Yeah, yeah. So what I ended up doing, like after like trying to fix it for hours, I ended up just giving the bicycle